Okay, this is my last log. The mic is propped on a chipped saucer because the desk hums when the radiator kicks. I've shoved a towel under the window to keep the draft out, but the frame still rattles when the heat pipes expand. My apartment always sounds like a hull settling at depth. Wood answering metal, metal answering water, I can't see. You can probably hear the building breathing. If you can't, your bones can. That low ache behind your ears. It's not a migraine. It's the floor and the air agreeing on a note. I exhale, and the note goes a fraction darker, like someone dimming a room you didn't know how to switch. If it syncs with my breath, turn this off. I know how that sounds. I know how everything I'm about to say will sound. You get used to people smiling politely and filing you under stories and stress. I used to file myself there too, until the night the bathroom mirror fogged evenly and then cleared in rings, like a pebble had been dropped in the glass. This isn't a haunting. I don't believe in ghosts. The thing that followed me home from the bottom of the Pacific is not an old soul with unfinished business. It's not a demon. It's physics we misused. Pressure and resonance and distance rubbed together until they made a door we didn't mean to open. It's the ocean asking to be heard in a language it always had, that we mistook for silence. I'm not telling you this to scare you. Scaring you is accidental. I'm telling you because I can't hold the note alone anymore. There's a cup of tea next to the mic. It was hot once. The surface looks still until you look properly, until you stop telling yourself a story about stillness and watch. There, see it? The very center trembles. It answers my chest like a tiny seismograph. My ribs rise. The tea confesses. I didn't teach it that. Something else did. I should start the way the textbooks taught me. Define terms, state a hypothesis. Here's one. In 1998, at a depth where light is a rumor, we listened to something that was not meant for us. Here's another. It listened back. There are names I won't use because of paper-thin legal threats, and because speaking certain words is like knocking on a door, and my fingers are raw. But I can tell you the shape of it. We were young and funded and brave enough to confuse that with being safe. There were new ears on our submersible, new ways to strip the world down to its frequencies and lay them out like bones on a table. We wanted to prove a sound was made by geology, and we dragged an instrument over God's mouth. When I came home, everything sounded wrong. My apartment was the same. Mildew in the shower sealant, cinnamon and dust when the radiators first woke in November, the neighbor's TV leaking laugh tracks through the plaster. But underneath was a floor that didn't exist before. A brown note that only my bad ear hears, a soft compression that smooths the shape of noise and makes it expectant. I don't sleep much. When I do, I wake at the same moment every night, sweating like I'm in a wet suit, with the taste of coins behind my teeth and a wordless certainty that the ceiling has moved closer to my mouth. The house pops as it cools, and I count the pops like a child saying grace. 3, 5, 7. Odd numbers calm me. Even ones feel like doors closing. I'm buying time. You don't need my biography. You need one instruction. If anything in this story feels like it's listening back, if your fan or your fridge or the dark space under your couch seems to lean toward you, stop the recording. I'm serious. Close it. Go outside. Listen for ordinary wind. But if you're still here, it's already in the room. We taught it the way. I rehearsed this part in the mirror and always mess it up. The mirror doesn't care. It fogs and clears and ripples whether I speak or not. Okay, clean and slow. We laid cable. Not just us. All of us. We laced the seabed in glass and light and metal, and where those cables sagged and kissed the soft floor, the world learned a new throat. You don't have to believe me. You can Google pictures of repeaters and call me dramatic. But hold your breath, just for a second, and tell me you don't feel the room lean toward your lungs, curious. I tap the mic, and it gives back not a click, not here, but a soft knock from a 0.6 inches to the left of the mic, as if the sound took a shortcut through the wall. You won't hear it on the recording unless you live in an old building with hot water bones. That's the worst of it. I can't make you hear what I hear without teaching your house to speak. There's a story I could tell you about the day I came up, salt dried in white ladders on my cheeks, and realized the ship's railing was vibrating with a note no one else noticed. There are 100 small stories, like how elevators sing the same pitch in every building and how it changes in the rain. But that's down the slope, and I need you with me at the top. Don't get used to the tone. Don't let your body fold around it like it belongs. You want proof, a number, a timestamp. I can give you measurements, hertz and decibels, and the way infrasound sneaks under doors and makes temples throb. But that becomes a math lecture, and we both know you didn't press play for a lecture. You press play because we're still a species that gathers in the dark and listens when someone says, I have seen something you haven't, and it has seen me. It has seen me. I'm going to tell you what happened, and then you can decide whether to leave a light on, or leave your house, or leave this alone. You deserve that choice. I didn't get one. We thought we'd listen to the ocean like we always had and come back with a graph and a joke and a scar to point to in bars. We came back with a mouthful of pressure that never left. If you feel the lone note become your note. If your breath starts to conduct instead of fill, stop. I can't say that enough. Stop. If you're still here, then yeah, you hear it. Or it hears you. Let me take you down. The first time I saw the R/V Nereid in the South Pacific glare, she looked less like a ship and more like a white scar stitched into blue. Diesel and salt and hot rope, tar hung in the air, and somewhere a box of bananas was ripening into a sweetness that didn't belong at sea. The hull ticked like a cooling engine. The ocean around us slapped and subsided, a patient giant teaching its one lesson. Helios had a vinyl banner zip tied to the aft crane and NOAA decals on the containers, as if the right stickers could make the purpose cleaner than it was. We were officially out to install a fiber repeater and ground truth, a hydroacoustic anomaly flagged the year before. Unofficially, we were out to answer a question that had started to gnaw at certain desks with certain budgets. If Event 773 wasn't ice or geology, what was riding inside that sound? Kincaid met me at the gangway, hand like a rope knot, grip steady as deck steel. He had the weather-browned eyes of someone who knew every clank a submersible could make when it wanted to scare you. You're the acoustic brain, he said. You get seasick, you lie. I'm not babysitting. I don't, I said. Lie. He smirked. I liked him immediately and didn't trust him at all. Miguel popped up behind him with a wrench tucked into the back pocket of a t-shirt that said "No Gods, No Gauges." He was all elbows and grin and a scar at the hairline that made him look like he'd laughed his way out of a bad story. He hefted a coil of cable as if it were a sleeping dog. Welcome to the world's most expensive extension cord, he said. You the one who can hear ghosts and static? No ghosts, I said. Just bad math. A poet, he said, and clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make my teeth knock. Nora arrived late to the hangar bay with a stack of notebooks pressed to her chest and a pencil behind one ear. Tendrils of hair sprung loose from a bun like she'd argued with the wind and the wind had lost. I knew her papers before I knew her face, spectrograms annotated with questions that looked like prayers. She laid her palm on the bulkhead like a doctor listening to a patient. Nor, she said, and then blinked as if realizing introductions went both ways. Sorry, flights. Your? Acoustic physics, I said. I listen for a living. Me too, she said. Only my clients are whales. We smiled at each other like thieves in a church. Briefing was in a room that smelled like coffee and printer toner. A map of the South Pacific taped to the wall with blue painter's tape that curled at the corners. A Helios man, tan, laminate smile, a shirt that didn't know what to do with salt, stood at the front next to a NOAA scientist with a tired bun and a pencil liner scar of eyeliner. The Helios logo on his badge flashed every time he turned his head, like a fish scale catching light. Our mandate is straightforward, Helios said. We're installing a repeater at these coordinates, integrating it with the existing trunk line. NOAA gets continuous hydrophone data from the new sensor package for their research deliverables. He nodded toward the NOAA scientist, who didn't nod back. We also have a window to perform a ground truthing operation for Event 773, the so-called Bloop. He said Bloop like it embarrassed him. The Bloop is a nickname, Nurse said, not quite under her breath. It was an acoustic detection in 97, broadband, rising frequency, very, very loud. Loud enough you could triangulate it across arrays on opposite sides of the ocean. Whales don't shout across basins, Miguel said softly. Neither do icequakes, Nurse said, and then glanced at me as if I might present an answer like a coin pulled from behind a child's ear. The NOAA scientist clicked a slide. Spectrograms bloomed blue-red on the screen. The room cooled a degree. In the bands, the anomaly arced upward like a question mark. We want sea truth, she said. That's it. We want to know if there's a physical structure here that could produce something like this by purely geological means. We don't care about claptrap. We care about rocks and water and pressure. Good, I said, because that was my religion too. Rocks, water, pressure. Everything else was superstition laid over a graph. Helios smiled with all his teeth. And if it is not geological, he said lightly, we'd like first look. For technological inference. He'd said the secret out loud without saying it. Technology, not geology. If someone else was at the bottom of the Pacific making a noise big enough to shake the room we were in, Helios wanted to politely steal the trick. After, Kincaid walked me down to the hangar where the submersible sat like a beetle in a cradle. DSV Lachesis. She was a sealed titanium sphere with a face full of lights and manipulator arms folded like praying hands. The acoustic array looked like a wreath around her belly, black and studded, and the cable route to the data rack had been taped in that careful, chaotic way that meant Miguel had done it. She's mean but fair, Kincaid said, patting the hull. Treat her like a dog that likes to bite. What's the sampling floor? I asked Nor, who was already crouched by the array with a multimeter, her hair slipping forward like a curtain. Below our hearing, she said. Below our bones hearing, if we're lucky. I ran my fingers over the spectral twin interface, a sloppy miracle weed Frankenstein from Old Navy code and grad student obsession. It was a deconvolution algorithm that could strip harmonics from harmonics and hand you back the argument the world was having with itself. It'll lie to you if you want it to, I said, more to myself than anyone. It'll find what you came looking for. Then don't come looking for a whale that isn't there, Nur said without looking up. I didn't tell them about the last time I'd been out this far, long before any of this, how the sea had stapled my heart to the inside of my ribs when a rip current took something I loved and lifted it away without a splash. I didn't say the name. Everyone on ships carries a jar of salt behind the breastbone. We don't take them out to show. Night fell soft and huge. On deck, lights pooled under our feet, and the horizon disappeared into a single band of velvet black. The repeater sat in its crate like a coffin with handles, stenciled letters bleeding in the lamplight. I pressed my palm to the crate and felt a tremor that might have been the engine, might have been my heart. Miguel materialized at my elbow with 2 paper cups of coffee that tasted like burnt rope. We're going to drop that box into a trench and pray it doesn't become modern art, he said. Tell me something cheerful. The SOFAR channel will carry our complaints around the world, I said. He snorted. Global service with local outages. Across the deck, Nor had a hydrophone over the side, cable making a dark slash into darker water. She had the headphones on, eyes closed, shoulders lifting and falling as if the ocean were a breathing animal and she was sinking to it. What do you hear? I asked. Everything, she said without opening her eyes. Ships. Shrimp. Something too low for my bones. The ship rolled, slow and purposeful. Somewhere below the surface, the cable we were out here to tend hummed the note that money makes. I could feel it in my molars. I could feel something else, too, a patience that wasn't ours. Later, on the catwalk above the hangar, the Helios man cornered me with a smile as harmless as a knife in wrapping paper. Off the record, he said, if spectral twin parses anything odd, if the source looks engineered, even inferentially, we'd appreciate a quiet channel. Before Noah, I mean. Science first, I said. He nodded, as if I'd agreed. Of course. Science first. When he left, I breathed out and watched my breath fold into the dark like a small white flag. Kincaid joined me, hands on the rail, looking down at Lachesis under her tarp. You ever get the feeling, he said, that the ocean isn't empty water, it's a room, and we just keep walking into different parts of the same room? All the time, I said. Tomorrow, he said, we see if the room wants us there. I lay in my bunk and listened to the ship talk to itself through the night. Pipes ticking, bulkheads mumbling, the hull's slow complaint. The ocean answered in a language I pretended I didn't know yet. I closed my eyes and saw the spectrogram arc, rising like a held breath. In the morning, we would put a hand to the ocean's throat and ask it to sing. We told ourselves we were only checking a box, installing a thing that needed installing. But the secret sat at the table with us and smiled, and I understood, too late, that we weren't the only ones listening. The crane line sang, and the deck dropped away, and then there was only water, an entire sky of it, swallowing us smooth. Last day blue peeled off the viewport like a thin sticker, leaving cobalt, then bruise purple, then a heavy, polished black that took our reflections and folded them into itself. The sub trembled once as the cradle released, a dog shaking off a hand, and Kincaid rode the ballast like he was rolling a cigarette. "Welcome to the mail chute," he said, palms light on the sticks. "Breathe like you're not thinking about breathing." I was already thinking about breathing. The sphere smelled like cold metal and old coffee, rubber seals, and the faint chemical sweetness of the scrubber canisters. Condensation purled at the seam of a bolt above my head and wobbled with each of my inhales. Nora's shoulder touched mine, warm through 2 layers. Miguel wedged himself under the console with a wrench between his teeth, coaxing a phantom rattle out of existence with brief, decisive taps. Outside, the ocean glittered with bioluminescence where our lights brushed it. Pinpricks, wisps, a smear of neon blue as a siphonophore chain arced past like a fragile train. Plankton flashed in protest, then the protests thinned, then they were gone. The sea turned from a hallway of fireflies into a room with the lights off. Surface whales at 3 o'clock, Nor murmured into her mic, eyes on her headphones readout. 2 singers, 1 chorus. Humpbacks, give them a minute. We hung at 50 meters while their song poured around us, a stacked cathedral of notes, mournful and mathematical. It made the metal of the sphere feel thinner, in the way beauty can make skin too tight. Then the voices tapered, dwindled, folded into their own echoes. "Going down," Kincaid said softly, and vented. The ocean accepted us like a debt paid. The marine snow thickened. Flock and diatoms and the wreckage of lunch from 1,000 miles away drifted by like ash. It looked slow enough to touch and stop, but the numbers on the depth gauge scrolled with purpose. 200, 500, 1,000. My tongue tasted coin bitter. My breath fogged the edge of the viewport in a crescent that faded and returned like a tide. The sea grew heavy in sound. The hull took on a voice, tiny ticks as stresses redistributed, a long, low groan like a yawn from a sleeping animal. "This is the part where you tell a joke," Miguel said from under the consoles. "Tradition demands." "I don't do jokes," Kincaid said. "I do procedures." "Procedures keep us alive," Nurse said. "Jokes keep us from clawing the paint," Miguel said, and spat the wrench back into his hand. He grinned, teeth bright in the low light. "So, a priest, a rabbi, and a man terrified of dying in a sealed ball of metal walk into the abyss. Depth 2,000, Kincaid said, not unkind. The SOFAR channel found us like weather. It came up from the floor and down from the surface and in from everywhere at once. A murmuring sea of distant storms and ship screws and pops like nervous teeth. The world talking to itself from far away. It filled the gaps between words, smooth as oil. I adjusted a gain and it flooded my bones, a velvet pressure at the hinge of my jaw. "Background's busier than forecast," I said. "Storms in the West Pacific are bleeding in." Those clicks could be beaked whales. Or some poor Navy exercise. "Copy poor Navy," Miguel said. "Hope they brought snacks." "I'm going lights to 20%, Kincaid said. The cabin dimmed, the instrument panels glowed, taking on a conspiratorial intimacy. Outside, the black pressed back. We were the only heaters in a cold cathedral. The console on my right, the one lashed into the sub with Miguel's careful chaos of gaffer tape and zip ties, spooled our target coordinates in a neat line. Event 773, the Bloop. Lat long. The numbers should have been calm. They should have sat like a pin in a map. Instead, they shivered, advanced, retreated, stuttered 2 decimal places, and then apologized, settling somewhere new. If you pretended hard enough, it could have been multipath. If you stopped pretending, it looked like the pin had sprouted legs. "Getting drift on the fix," I said. 30 meters east, then 20 back. Now it's below us. Now it's no. That's not right. "Thermocline's messing with you," Kincaid said. "Current shear." "Could be," I said, because in the polite universe of the surface, things didn't move unless we moved them. Nor leaned closer to the spectral twin display, the waterfall of frequencies painting our little corner of abyss in a way eyeballs couldn't. "Look," she said quietly. There. A thin line where there should have been none, a hair-fine harmonic riding under the swell of ambient noise. It wasn't the Bloop, not that big arcing question. This was smaller, more intimate. It rose a fraction and wrote, in its own time, a curve shaped like a letter. Not English. Not any alphabet that belonged to mouths. Artifact, I said, reflexive, because that was the safe word. Deconvolution overshoot. The algorithm is learning cursive, Miguel said. Reflections shouldn't be coming from that angle, Nur said, tapping the display as if touch could persuade it. We've got returns from below us, slanting up. The seabed shouldn't be that close yet. Kincaid adjusted our descent rate, and the sub responded with a gentle lag that made my stomach sway. Depth, 3,000. 3,200. The hull ticked again, a slow heartbeat. We paused to adjust ballast, and, for a breath, even the SOFAR murmur seemed to step back. Our guests have quieted, Nur said, taking one ear cup off to look at me instead of through me. There was a distant pod to the north. Gone now. Maybe they got bored, Miguel said. Maybe they didn't get a joke, Kincaid said. I scraped my thumbnail over the edge of the console to stop my hand from shaking. Some silences grow out of absence. They are emptinesses, hollows where a thing should be and isn't. Some silences arrive. They have weight. They settle into a room and put a finger to your lips. This felt like the second kind. At 3,500 meters, the pressure outside could have made a diamond out of soft bone. The headset cupped my skull like a second, harder skull. Spectral twin, diligent and eager, began to jitter in a way that had my stomach and my training arguing. In theory, if you ping and listen, you get back echoes that are symmetrical around your own noise. A friendly little pluripotent smear of physics. In practice, the screen showed curves that leaned toward one another like handwriting practiced in a mirror. A stem, a loop, a curve repeated at intervals that said not random, not environmental, not us, not the world as described in the PDF manuals. Say it's geology, Miguel offered. Make me feel okay. Multipath with ducting across the channel, I said. Fronts refracting energy into the deep sound speed minimum. Was that English? Kincaid asked. It used to be, I said. Nur breathed in, slow and steady, like the oxygen had to be earned. Do you hear that? I listened past the ship's screws from continents away, past the restful hiss of 1,000 kilometers of water, past my own pulse doing what it could with the circumstances. There was a space where the clicks and hisses should have been. Not a hole exactly, more like a covered bowl. Sound slid around it, reluctantly. We're okay, Kincaid said, because pilots must say that. All systems nominal. Depth, 3620. Trim is good. If this is a duct, it'll be useful. Shadow zones are friends. I looked up from the spectrogram to the viewport and discovered the oldest headache, nothing to focus on. The light from our own lamps made us blind. Suspended motes spun into galaxies and fell away. Something pale curled by, then unfurled and resolved into nothing but a trick of backscatter. When I leaned closer, my breath fogged the glass, and it was like leaning into a mirror that wanted to be a mouth. Why does it smell like pennies? Miguel asked. Because your brain read the word pressure on the checklist, Nur said. She was trying for light and landing on brittle. Psychosomatic. Geez, eat a gummy bear. He took a gummy bear. He bit its head off. Witness me, bear. My own private grief stirred, its small hand in mine. The last time I had been this deep inside a quiet, I had also been counting. 3, 5, 7. Numbers like prayers, numbers like knots tying me to a human room. I forced myself to count the clicks instead. There were fewer. Spectral twin is pulling pre-echo, I said. That should be impossible. The words came out too fast, thin. We're getting energy we didn't emit. You can't get the reflection before the hit, Kincaid said. You sure the filter isn't stepping? Nothing's stepping, I said. The screen drew a flourish. A long, elegant arc that rose like a breath held and didn't release. The trick of the display was that the world never really wrote on it. It simply let you see what you had already asked for. This felt like being written back to. It's handwriting, Nur whispered. Tell me you don't see it. I see it, I said. Maybe it was grids and time resolution and a brain wired to find order in tea leaves. Maybe it was what it was. Either way, the fixation moved through the display with the lazy confidence of something that had done this before. The bloop's coordinates stuttered again, a polite tremor, and then settled half a degree into the black. Do we chase? Kincaid asked. The word hung in the air like a hook. Not yet, I said. We don't even know what's running. Outside, The last, lonely specks of bioluminescence went out, as if some cold fingertip had smudged them away. The marine snow thickened into a steady fall, a blizzard no wind could touch. The hull stopped chattering and went very, very still. Some silences feel deliberate. They feel like a room putting its finger to its lips and waiting to see if you obey. I would like to say I did. I would like to say I knew how. At 4,000 meters, the ocean holds you like a heavy coat. At 4,200, it takes the coat away and leaves you in a room with soft walls. The first thing that goes missing is clutter. The SOFAR murmur thins to a silk you could tear with your teeth. The second thing is our own voice. Kincaid pings the world by the book, short pulse, modest power, and the return should be a bright fingernail against the dark. Instead, it comes back rounded, smaller than it left, as if some mouth met it halfway and chewed. That's not how echoes behave. Range. Kincaid keeps his voice even, soft the way you speak in libraries. Altitude reading says 180 off the bottom. I say. The return amplitude is wrong. Like the floor is covered in velvet. Miguel peeks up from his nest of cables, eyes shiny in the instrument glow. Velvet floors at the bottom of the Pacific. Finally, a little class. Nor takes a breath and removes one headphone ear cup so she can look at us directly. Life does avoid things, she says. Anoxic zones, cold seeps, predator corridors. They can make silence. But not like this. Not like what? Kincaid asks, easing us down in 5-meter increments, careful as a parent putting a feverish child to bed. Like a bubble of anti-sound, Nor says. It's taking energy out. Canceling. If I flip the phase on our active pulse in my head, I can almost hear a ghost of the return. She winces, presses 2 fingers to the cartilage just in front of her ear. It's making me want to whisper. We all adjust without meaning to. Shoulders lift. Back straighten. The sphere suddenly feels holy. Outside the viewport, the world has texture again. Not light. Light is a rumor this far down, but motion. The marine snow has reorganized itself into lines, as if flowing around edges we can't see. Our own lamps cut lanes through the particulate, and those lanes bend slightly where they shouldn't, kinking around something that isn't there. Look at the front scatter, I say. It's slipping to starboard. Kincaid nudges the thrusters to port. The sticks answer. The feel of thrust comes into his hands. The sub behaves like a careful animal, but the drift vector on the NAV slowly rotates in a way that isn't us. I'm holding heading, Kincaid says. She says we're yawing 10 degrees. She says what she's told. Miguel says, tapping the INS. Euro drift. It's not drift, I say. It's being placed. We fall another 20 meters as gently as breadcrumbs. The hull ticks once, reconsidering stresses, and then goes quiet. I check spectral twin and find myself bracing for another flourish of handwriting. The display has become conservative, stingy even. It paints back what we feed it and nothing else. That should be a relief. It isn't. Sonar composite, Nor says. She taps her screen, and a ghostly map coalesces. Nothing like the rippled dunes of sediment we expected. Instead, long, parallel arcs repeat into the dark like ribs. Between them is a channel of softer return, a corridor in negative. Beyond that, above us, if the interpretation is right, hangs a convex absence, smooth where geology should be messy. Kincaid lets out a laugh that isn't a laugh. The bottom of the sea grew architecture while I wasn't looking. It's not architecture, I say. It's a lack of architecture that's consistent. It's the vaulted absence. Good phrase, terrible situation, Miguel says. He stares at the map like it might bite him. You telling me the ground is holes arranged in neat rows? I'm telling you the world is subtracting from itself in a pattern, Nor says softly. I don't like it. Our pings go out again. They come back thin, with their teeth filed down. Each return is a swallowed word. Each word says shoo. Can we back out? I ask, before I can dress it up prettier. Kincaid's hands move in small prayers. Reverse. Lateral left. Up a hair. The slosh of water in ballast tanks is the only sound that is still allowed to be wet. The instrument repeater in its crate behind us, bolted and braced, gives a tiny tremor against its restraints. I turn. Did you? Not me, Miguel says. He reaches out and lays 2 fingers on the crate as if feeling for a pulse. The coil inside vibrates, a whisper you can sense more than hear. It's shivering. The brake is engaged, Kincaid says without looking away from his world. If that spool is moving, we've got a problem. It isn't moving, Miguel says. It's being played. He presses his ear to the crate, like a string under a thumb. The word played sets something old and unhelpful loose in my chest. Once, long ago, someone I loved put their hand on a piano lid and felt the notes through the wood as someone else practiced scales below. It was an intimate thing, hearing sound by pressure. This feels like that, if the pianist were the size of a continent and impatient. Marking this zone, I say, because doing things we can label is the only game that feels like control. I'm calling it Siren Quiet. Cute, Kincaid says. He's sweating, but his mouth still finds shape for humor. We're getting out of it. Are we? Nurse says, not accusing. Not yet, just asking the room to show its math. She listens and flinches. There. Did you feel that? Pressure change. The skin over my sinuses pulls tight for a heartbeat, then loosens. The change is so delicate I could pretend it isn't real if I wanted to lie to myself. We all swallow in the same moment. Our ears click, obedient. Not a leak, Miguel says, eyes flicking to the panel that would tell him if the ocean was coming to visit. Not us. Gradients, I say. A lens. We found a natural acoustic lens. Natural, Noor repeats, like she's trying out a hat she doesn't want to wear. Okay. We clatter another ping into the quiet. It vanishes. The return arrives late and smaller, like a wave that crawled. Spectral twin sulks, punitive in its refusal to invent. The comb of suppressed frequencies on the passive channel is almost pretty, regular notches carved into the noise, a record with careful scratches. Somebody put in a notch filter the size of a football field, Miguel says. Is that allowed? It's not a somebody, Kincaid says. His voice is tired now, threadbare. It's water and heat and salt and pressure. It is the biggest, slowest engineer in the world, and we are leaving its house. He pushes the sticks again. The numbers on the screen respond in the way numbers do when they want to be believed. The rush in the ballast tanks answers with its wet animal voice. I watch the particles outside, expecting a change, a drift toward. Instead, marine snow curves around the viewport in two soft streams, like air splitting around a car at speed. Only we aren't moving that fast, and the streams converge again behind us with an almost visible reluctance. Feel that? Nur whispers. We aren't alone. No one asks what she means. We all mean a different thing, and we are all correct. For a moment that lasts much longer than physics, the sub stops being a machine and becomes a held object. Not gripped, not crushed, cradled. We hang in something that has no texture except the absence of texture. My heartbeat climbs my throat. I can hear my own swallow against the inside of the helmet like a huge animal gulping down a lake. We'll burn the thrusters, Kincaid says. Calm. We'll make our own ugly. He feeds power. The sub vibrates with righteous complaint. The particulate outside blurs. And still, the drift vector on the NAV slides back toward the pale sketch of a corridor the sonar insists is not a hallucination. I hate corridors, Miguel says. He makes a little sign with two fingers on the console. I don't know if it's superstition or a circuit test. Don't anthropomorphize, Noor says, and then she can't help it. It listens when we do that. I put a knuckle very gently against the viewport, the way you might touch glass in a museum to see if it is really there. The cold comes into my skin in a straight line. The marine snow is moving around the line like the first draft of a whirlpool. That is the first thing I've done that scares me as it happens. I pull my hand back. Here, I tell Kincaid. Let me try a different pulse. A spread spectrum chirp. Low energy. He nods without taking his eyes off the lies we've taught the instruments to tell. I send the chirp. It goes out like an apology. It comes back like a hand placed over a mouth. The comb of notches on passive turns to a single, elegant valley. The repeater spool taps once, the tiniest kiss against its strap. I hate that, Miguel says softly, honest as a kid. Same, I say. I hate that very much. Nor breaks the rule we aren't saying out loud and speaks direct to the water, to whatever is editing it. We're just passing through, she says quietly. We aren't here to hurt anything. Don't negotiate with physics, Kincaid says. He means it to cut tension, and it does, a little, like a stitch being tightened. He feeds another polite measure of power. The current under his hands grows toothy. The sub quivers with the effort. He murmurs to her, nonsense syllables that have kept other machines honest. We creep. The corridor on the composite map crawls past. The ribs repeat, patient. The vaulted absence hangs above in perfect ignorance of geology. I imagine the ocean built its own anechoic chamber here, some place to listen to itself without the clang of continents and storms. I imagine we've stumbled into the pews without an invitation. Note it, I say. Every meter, every notch, every weird. Already on it, Miguel says, and I can hear the relief in work, the comfort of numbers. Siren Quiet zone starts at 3980 and extends to at least 4250. Notches at hell. Regular intervals. Like teeth. Teeth. Nor repeats. Sure. Why not teeth? My tongue tastes like copper again. I wish for something banal. A leak to fix, a fuse to swap, a human problem. Instead, I have a bubble where sound goes to be unmade and a machine that trembles under my hand like a horse trying not to bolt. The sub settles, then lifts, then settles again. Small movements I can't attribute to any stick or setting. I am afraid to say aloud what it feels like. It feels like being guided into position. It feels like being tested for fit. Kincaid's voice drops, nearly a breath. We are not staying here. No argument, I say. We slide left if we can. We give it space. He gives it space. The quiet gives us back just enough control to pretend it was our idea. The marine snow loses a little of its choreography. The notch filter eases by a hair. The spool stops tapping the strap and only hums. We drift into the edge of the map the world keeps to itself. The sonar ribs thin, become the suggestion of ribs. The vaulted absence lifts away into the generalized blankness we call the ocean when we can't afford precision. The SOFAR murmur creeps back in, filling the tender hollows in our ears. When Kincaid pings, the return comes back with its corners, not sharp, but real. Out, he says, a swallowed laugh in the word. We're out. Noted, Miguel says, writing as if he can summon more distance by naming it. Siren Quiet, edge here. Crown me, I did a thing. Nor takes her hands off her headphones only when she trusts her body to remember how to move. We have to go back, she says. I don't want to. But we have to. We will, Kincaid says. But not like beggars. He runs through a checklist with the tenderness of someone tucking a child into a car seat. We'll come at it smarter. A little higher. We'll figure out what it wants. I look down at the composite map, at the corridor and its ribs, and the place where sound goes to be edited into shape. Some silences are emptiness. Some silences are instructions. The Siren Quiet feels like a finger to the lips and then a palm under the chin, guiding the face to look where it wants. I put a dot on the map no one else can see, a dot I will carry back to an apartment where the radiator sings. I do not know it yet, but the note under that radiator will be this one. We angle away and the ocean remembers how to make noise again. It starts small, the pop of distant shrimp, the whisper of particulate hitting glass, a far hemisphere ship dragging its screws across the planet. It feels obscene to be comforted by such ordinary violence. I let it comfort me anyway. Next time, Kincaid says, we bring a joke so good it works on water. Next time, Miguel says, we bring earplugs for God. Nor doesn't joke. She looks at the place we are not, at the absence that shaped itself like a room, and she says, very low, it hurt us. I don't correct her. I don't say it was just physics. Someday I stop saying that, but not today. I watch the numbers climb by a whisper. I listen to the world put its noise back on like a coat, and I try not to feel naked without the quiet. We rise out of the Siren Quiet like surfacing from anesthesia, and the map opens into a bowl so stark my chest forgets how to move. Ahead, the seafloor slumps into a perfect oval depression. The middle isn't sand or silt. It is flat and black and reflective as obsidian, a lake set inside the ocean. Kincaid feathers the sticks. The thrusters whisper, and the sub eases forward. Our lights skate across the surface and come back wrong, doubled and then bent, like the world is cracking us in half and putting the pieces next to each other. The line where water meets brine quivers like heat above summer asphalt, shimmering in a way that makes distance feel like a lie. Brine pool, Nor says, breathless and reverent. Look at the interface. It's so clean. It's a lake, Miguel says, leaning past me to stare. We found a lake under the ocean, and it's dressed for a funeral. My tongue goes metallic. I swallow, and the taste is copper and something sweeter, like a cheap coin in a glass of syrup. The sphere smells like rubber, sweat, and the ghost of coffee, but under it is another smell, a whisper of eggs turned wrong in a cold pan. The rim of the pool is not a rim. It's a choir loft. Chimneys rise in a ring, fragile and pale, some thin as wrists, some thick as thighs, all of them organ pipe regular, each capped with a delicate lip of mineral gloss. The lamp beams find glassiness cased in salt and something else, translucent coats that flash back at us like eyes. Those are not typical seeps, Nor says, clinical to keep from swearing. They're too tall for a brine lake rim, and the texture is pretty, Miguel offers, and then regrets the word. Pretty in a hospital way. The cameras hate this place. The feed twitches as the image crosses the interface. The picture tears sideways a fingernail and then mends. LEDs in the boom swing their temperature without permission, blue turning green, green turning bone white, as if the light is deciding what color ocean should be. Refraction, I say, as much to calm myself as to inform. Different refractive index. Salt content is through the roof. It bends light like a prism, and heat shimmer had a kid. Copy prism baby, Miguel murmurs, hands already moving over the manipulator controls. Arms live. Easy does it. Kincaid brings us to the lip. The sub rocks once on its own shadow and steadies. The brine surface is so perfect it might as well be glass. It doesn't ripple unless we breathe too hard. When we do, tiny wavelets stir and slide along the edge, returning to where they started like disciplined thoughts. Stop there, Nurse says sharply. Hold. Don't touch the layer. Kincaid holds. He could hold a breath for an hour if the sea asked. We're a meter above the interface. 9 from the nearest chimney. Your call. The chimneys are capped with fringe. At first I think life. Vestigial beard of bacteria. The delicate white of a colony that found a god in sulfide and learned to worship. But the fringe doesn't sway. It angles, deliberate. Each filament finding the same point the way sunflowers find the sun. The filaments are too regular to be natural and too still to be alive. What am I looking at? Miguel breathes, not asking a question so much as letting the question ask him back. The spectral twin display has been sulking since the quiet. Now it clears its throat. A lace of harmonics rises along the bottom of the spectrum like someone dragging a nail across velvet. It isn't a sound, not exactly. It's a pressure poem. My molars hum in a low, sympathetic chord, and the chord plays itself along the frame of the sub. Pressure gradient is weird here, I say, which is like telling a drowning man the water is wet. There's something pushed into the interface, like a hand pressed against from below. Don't, Nor says, as if someone had suggested the manipulator dip a finger. If you disturb the interface, we'll cloud our instruments with a brine layer we can't clear without going home. We didn't come for a swim, Kincaid says softly. We came for a listen. Miguel holds the claw in a hovering posture over the fringe, steady as a surgeon. In the lamps, the filaments are not hair, but glass. Glass spun fine as spider silk and arranged in bundles that triangulate into a lattice, as if a bubble had got halfway to being a cathedral and then reconsidered. Tell me that's a mineral, he says. Lie to me kindly. Minerals don't point, Nor says. Not altogether, not like that. Corporate wants proof, Miguel says, because jokes were the badge of cows walking into abattoirs. Imagine the bonus for bringing home a piece of God's beard. Don't start with God, Kincaid says. He prefers helicopters. I can't stop watching the lake. The reflection doesn't behave. When I lean, a twin sub leans back from an impossible angle. The chimney's reflections stretch as if the brine is tugging at them like taffy. In the mirror, I swear one filament twitches toward me faster than the real one. It's not a reflection, I say. It's a window. The density gradient is acting like a lens. It might be summing rays into, plain please, Kincaid says. If we put a finger in, we touch more than a finger, I say. We touch more. Nor pinches the bridge of her nose. She looks tired and hungry and lit from within by the sort of fear that turns to worship if you let it. We deploy the hydrophone. We sample later, if at all. The acoustic data is the thing. If this is geology, it will sing like geology. If it isn't, it will sing like something with lungs. Miguel laughs without sound. I vote lungs. Stop. I say too quickly, and they all look at me. Just stop talking like that. Please. The LED nearest the brine sputters and slides from green to an antiseptic white. A waveform crawls over Spectral Twin's baseline, small as a scratch. My mouth tastes sweet salt again, and in the curve of the brine, I see our lamps skitter and settle into patterns I don't want to have a word for. Kincaid, I say, because saying a name is a way to nail yourself to a moment. Hold position. No thrust. Passive only. Copy hold, he says. There's sweat at his temple, and it doesn't roll. It stays, trembling, as if the air in here has viscosity now. Nor cues the drop. The hydrophone is a cylinder smaller than her forearm, smooth with scratched anodizing. Its cable twin-braided and hungry. She strokes the casing once, feel more than superstition, and feeds it over the side. It passes through the seam between worlds like a coin slipped into a slot. The surface doesn't break. It simply accepts. Recording, I say. The first second is ordinary noise, if any noise down here can be ordinary. Then the lake lifts in my bones, a fullness behind my ears, and the line on the screen begins to lift as if a throat cleared. Miguel shifts the manipulator closer to the fringe of glass, then stops an inch shy, obeying Nor's earlier no as if it's carved into his hands. The glass is not glass. It is too clean to be natural and too patient to be machine. The bundles make panes, and the panes make arches, and the arches, if you let your eyes blur, suggest a nave. Glass Cathedral. I whisper before I know I've said it. Don't name it, Nor says automatically. Naming is owning. Or being owned, Miguel says. I listen to the sub-brief. I listen to my breath answer. Outside, the shimmer wavers. For a moment, a pattern appears on the brine. Rings within rings, like a voice made visible. Then it's gone, and we're left with the reflection of our own gaudy lamps and our foolish animal faces pressed to the glass. We take nothing, Nur says, firm now. Not yet. We're already changing it by being here. Kincaid doesn't argue. He never argues about what keeps a crew alive. We have what we need, he says. We have a lake, a lens, a choir pit. We have the way in. The Spectral Twin scrolls on. In the white bone light, the chimneys look like organ pipes waiting for a hand to open. My molars throb a little. Somewhere under the sweetness, the taste of coins returns, humming in time with the smallest, lowest note I know. We hang over a mirror that isn't a mirror and pretend we can leave when we choose. Nor holds the cable in both hands like a leash on a very patient animal while the hydrophone sinks another slow foot into the brine. The surface does not break. It accepts. The cable's braid draws a clean dark line into the darker lake, and the line trembles by a hair when my breath does. The first sound isn't a sound. It's a rearrangement, a soft tightening in the cartilage behind my ears and a buzzing in my molars, as if the room has shifted its weight onto the balls of its feet. Spectral Twin, sulking since the quiet, wakes as if someone said its name. There's always something, always the sea's cookery of hiss and pop. This is not that. The baseline lifts in a way that isn't amplitude, not exactly. It's as if pressure itself is a singer, and this place is its chest. Then the chord arrives. We call it the Bloop because we're a species that loves to name monsters cute. The thing colder than cute comes on like the Milky Way looks from a dark field. Too many stars to comprehend until your eyes learn how to see them, and then you can't stop. The chord is stacked beyond our instrument's polite limits. Fundamentals shouldered against inharmonics shouldered against subharmonics neither air nor bone should be willing to carry. It's stitched across density layers like grooves in a record. When Nor inches the hydrophone deeper by a millimeter, the shape changes. Harmonics slip in, slip out. We are scanning tracks on a wax cylinder the size of a lake. It isn't a single voice. It is layered voices braided into one impossibility. The lowest layer is not even a note. It is weight. On top of that comes a wide band hum like a wind through pipe organs. But those pipes are bent in ways cathedrals were never designed to hold. Above that, delicate threads, trills, clicks, curlicues, decorate the mass like handwriting on a thick page. The screen renders the curlicues as strokes across the waterfall, up-curving, then down-curving, repeating, mirrored, answering. Call and response. Nor says, hushed despite herself. Look at the spacing. Look. Looks like a bug crawled across with an inked foot, Miguel says. It is the closest to Reverend I have heard him. Kincaid's hands hover over the sticks. My peripheral vision catches him squeezing them once, letting go. I'm holding, he says, to the sub and to us and to himself. Let it talk. The cable vibrates in Noor's fingers, and she feeds 2 more inches. The pressure in the sphere leans in like a curious person in a theater, front row. I watch Spectral Twin go to work. It builds scaffolds around the strokes, draws phantom lines, separates return from reverberation with the eagerness of a dog told it's a good dog. The response isn't a mirror. It's offset, delayed by a consistent grace note, then shifted, like a singer choosing to harmonize instead of repeat. Language has patterns. This has patterns. Interval repetition at odd primes. I say, hardly aware I'm speaking. Phrase length recurs. There's recursion, a clause that contains itself. You saying grammar? Miguel asks. I'm saying not random. The chord thickens. Or I hear deeper into it. Memory plays the trick where new details feel like new events. The lake's surface answers with subtle, ordered ripples that travel along the rim and vanish where the chimneys begin. The filaments that fringe the chimneys have been perfectly, disturbingly still. Now they tilt, a collective degree, as if someone passed a magnet. The knot glass catches our light and sends it back in little clean knives. Filaments are moving, Noor says. We're not pushing water. That's not convection. Kincaid shifts nothing. His knuckles blanch and then remember color. Copy, not convection. A rise in the chord threads itself into my head. An overtone that sounds like a laugh, except the laugh has been stretched and folded, made longer without being slower. Kincaid flinches. It's small, a shrug mistake, a muscle remembering a pain. You hear that? I ask before I can help myself. His jaw works. He doesn't answer. Then, low, in the voice you use when you bring a child into a room where you are not sure the furniture is bolted down. My boy used to. He had this awful laugh when he lied about brushing his teeth. He shakes his head, angry at himself for being the sort of man who brings the land down here. It's the way the harmonics ride. That's all. Miguel opens his mouth like he has a joke that could break everything and changes his mind. He stares at the lattice. They're shivering, he says. Those glass things. They're playing along. Hair on a forearm. Noor whispers. Her eyes are bigger than her face. Go gentle. Spectral Twin throws a fit of competence. It finds structure inside structure and lays them side by side. 2 columns with implied arrows between them. Our ping on the left, a reply on the right that shares some energy, borrows some frequency, adds a little that doesn't belong. The reply knows where our ping came from. It compensates for the hydrophone's tiny pendulum swing on the cable. It grows cleaner when Noor steadies her hands and dirtier when my breath comes too hard against the mic and turns the cabin into a drum. We make a call by existing. It answers by editing our existence and handing it back to us as something with meaning. I'm hearing it, Noor says, and her hand drifts without meaning to the spot over her sternum like she's checking her own stethoscope. It's her shoulders lock. For an instant her face empties, and she is somewhere else entirely. Headphones on, carpet of scripts wet with salt, her younger self tracing a spectrogram with a pen. Then she is here again and not alone. That's the call from the library. The reconstructed one. The Miocene, she says, then shakes her head fast like the words are burrs. No, I know that pattern. We ran it through synthesis. It's not supposed to exist outside a model. We all hear it. An extinct note unfurls inside the impossible chord, bloomed like a pressed flower in a book opened after 30 million years. It sounds wrong here and right. Exactly. Too. Like a photograph of your grandparents when they were beautiful. The hair on my forearms lifts and remembers a cold wind. If a thing can borrow the throat of a lost animal and sing it back, this is that. Noor, Miguel says very gently, the hands of a man who knows where the emergency blankets are. Stay with us. I am, she says, furious in order to be present. I'm right here. The lake takes a breath. It is not a metaphor. The brine's surface domes by less than a centimeter, a poor man's miracle, and relaxes. The sub answers with a minute pop in the hull that my ear and every other ear in this sphere hears as, yes. The cord reaches for me and finds what I brought into the room. It is not fair. Grief is private currency, and the ocean doesn't believe in privacy. I am back on a bad beach with a rip current shrugging its shoulders and a hand locked in mine, and then not. And the sound is not a scream or a splash, but a single, awful hush. There is a point when water closes over someone's head that is like a door that has decided. The cord borrows that door and opens it just enough to show me that I am not misremembering. There is a small hiss as air leaves a mouth that will not take another breath. The hiss makes it to the hydrophone from a lake within the sea at 4,000 meters like it learned to be carried. I am the one who flinches now. The taste of pennies floods. I say nothing. I don't have room. The screen is full of strokes. The suit clings to my back with sweat. The sphere feels smaller than it did this morning. Pull the hydrophone up a hand width. I say, because doing anything is a bridge out of the moment. Slow. Nor obeys with a surgeon's grace. The overtone that was a laugh thins, becomes a breath, becomes a plain note. The extinct call fades and ghosts. The hush remains, not as a sound, but as an expectation, a shaped absence, as if the cord has learned what empty is by asking me for it, and now will not unlearn. Don't give it that, Miguel says, seeing something on my face I forgot to hide. I'm not, I lie. I'm working. Kincaid's voice is the shape of the deck of a ship in storm. We've got the return. That's why we're here. We can go. I almost agree. Then Spectral Twin draws a sentence. I can't call it anything else. The strokes repeat at intervals that suggest not only prime spacing and mirror symmetry, but commas. There is a pause built into it, and then an answer. Not a mirror answer. A choice. We don't use our active ping again. We don't have to. The hull pings for us. It begins as a burr, a warm hum in the adhesive labels Miguel put down too neatly on the panel edges. The seam above my head, the one that sweated at shallow depth, acquires a polite rattle that isn't a rattle. Every surface sensitive to small shifts, the cable's jacket, the thin skin on the instrument screens, the little cone of air around my mouth, learns the same tone at once. We aren't just in the cord. We have become a string in its instrument. The hull sings back at a frequency none of us admits to recognizing. Miguel freezes with his hand on the manipulator. That's not us, he says, as if denying yourself hearing could make hearing untrue. Frame resonance, I say. It sounds idiotic. The numbers in my head that should anchor the world don't arrive. External excitation. We're resonating. Kincaid finishes, and the way he says the word has a father's heart and a pilot's hand in it, and neither is steady. Nor, shaken clean by her own moment with the dead, finds anger like a splint. That's my son's laugh. It almost was, she says, looking at Kincaid, not accusing him, accusing the pattern. It's a trick. It's borrowing timbers. It's doing that because we're doing this. It is doing this because we are, I say. We're part of the circuit now. Break the circuit, Miguel says. Reel in. Now. The cable's jacket whispers as Nor starts to retrieve. The brine does not try to keep the hydrophone. The surface quivers with a lover's reluctance, and then stills. The cord does not stop. Why would it? The lake is made of it. The ocean carries it. Only our intimacy with it changes. Spectral Twin refuses to be reasonable. Even with the sensor lifting, it finds echoes that should not exist and types them like a court stenographer, with brisk persistence and no opinion. The left column, our contributions, shrinks. The right column, its, continues, the delay between clauses lengthening as if whatever is writing had to reach farther, bend harder. Then, as the hydrophone leaves the last of the brine, the screen shows a final stroke that rises and does not fall. It hangs like a held breath. You seeing this? I ask, because asking makes it communal, and communal makes it less like a hand on the back of my neck in the dark. I see it, Nurse says. She sounds exhausted and very young. It's waiting. For what? Miguel asks. I think I know. I won't say it. The filaments shake themselves once like a dog coming out of rain and settle, pointed again at some alignment no compass has ever found. The LEDs on the boom drift back to respectable ocean blue. The instrument smell of warm plastic and scrubber carbonation pads the sphere like a familiar coat. In the silence that isn't, the hull keeps a little of the note. It will have it for a while. That is how resonance works. You tap a body. It says its name back to you until it forgets, unless something keeps reminding it who it is. We hang like a bead of mercury at the lip of a dark bowl and pretend we haven't been named. Kincaid runs his checklist. Miguel coils cable like it's a charm against anything. Nor writes down everything her hands can't keep by themselves. I fit the word language into my mouth, and it tastes like coins and salt and a promise I don't want to make. We should leave. There will be a later, I tell myself, to turn this into paper and proof. There will be time to say we heard the ocean listen and it remembered things for us. There will be time to decide whether to tell anyone that when you teach a body to hear below its bones, the world you are hearing might ask what you've brought for it to keep. The chord lowers, a conductor's hand bringing down a massive choir with one finger. The brine resumes its impersonation of glass. Our hull's little voice rehearses the note it learned and tucks it away, as if it might want it later. We pretend it didn't use our voices to say hello. We pretend we did not answer. We were almost clear when the lake stood up. The hydrophone was half a meter from the interface, cable whispering as Nor inched it home, when the brine bulged around the sensor tip, a perfect dome like a bubble that refuses to burst. Gravity seemed to reconsider its contract. Lights slid along the curve and gathered, pooling in a pale crown that made the sensor look like it wore a halo. Hold, Kincaid said, already holding. Nobody sneeze. The cord that had folded itself into our bones went from cathedral to feedback in a breath. Spectral Twins' waterfall seized into a single bright column, then tore sideways with a ragged stitch. The preamp clipped in a hot, angry burr. All our needles jogged and pegged, even the ones that had no business moving that fast. The lights strobed in a nauseous rhythm, not quite syncopated with my pulse, but close enough to make my scalp crawl. Kill the gain, I said, and my hands were already on the knobs, slapping them down to minimum. The sound didn't soften. It got more intimate. The sphere popped in tiny increments, like ribs trying to breathe against a tight shirt. Power fluctuation, Miguel said through his teeth. He had to shout to be heard over a noise that couldn't exist in air. Bus is clean. That's not us. That's the world. The brine dome swelled another centimeter, water thinking about being glass, thinking about being skin. The hydrophone's cable twanged in Nor's grip like it wanted to be a harp string. She held on and flattened her palm along the braid, a human hand against a line that led to a mouth too big to think about. Talk to me, Kincaid said. He was trying not to move. Every miracle of muscle memory in him wanted to adjust for a sea that had stopped behaving like sea. He feathered the thrusters a whisper, less than a whisper. The sub answered sluggishly, as if held. His left hand drifted toward the ballast dump. He slapped his own wrist hard enough to make the sound sharp in the strobing light. No. Bad idea. He put both hands back on the sticks and locked his elbows until the shake in his forearms had nowhere to go but into the metal. The smell changed. Hot plastic first, the way a cheap charger smells before it dies. Then something sweet and rotten crawled under that. Eggs gone wrong in a cold pan. The scrubber made its soft, obedient purr, and still the stink came. Check the scrubber, I said. It's fine, Miguel said. He wasn't looking at the panel. He was looking at the repeater crate behind us. The spool vibrated against its straps with a hum low enough to live in the spine. The spool's singing. I didn't turn that on. The filaments on the chimneys shivered in their glass patient way and angled a fraction toward us, toward the cable, toward everything we were. Reel it, Nurse said, and her voice was calm in the way panic gets when it runs out of places to go. Slow. No jerks. She pulled. The dome of brine did not break. It came with the sensor, clinging, swelling, as if the meniscus had decided to have opinions. The cable shook and settled, transmitting to my skin the shape of a word I did not know. Spectral Twin tried to show me, tried to stand between me and whatever this was and make it graphs. The call and response we had been coaxing like shy birds turned to a tight loop. The left column crowded the right until they were the same. Feedback, the ugly little tyrant that lives in every system, grinned and bared its teeth. Kill the loop, I said. We're feeding ourselves. We're passive, Nurse said. We've been passive. Not anymore, Kincaid said, and I could hear him feel the hull. We are the tone, and the room loves it. Then the sub took a breath. It wasn't the pumps. It wasn't the ballast. The sphere itself made a tiny, intimate pop and then relaxed a fraction against our shoulders, an animal settling into a hand. In that same instant, something wet touched my lip. I wiped it and looked at the streak on the back of my glove and thought of rust. Miguel sniffed once, twice. Blood sheeted out of his left nostril and ran over his mouth and onto his chin in a bright, private little river. He didn't seem to notice until a drop hit the back of his hand and jumped at the surprise. Shit, he said, conversationally. That's mine. Pressure spike? I asked, even as the gauges told us no, no, no in their flat battery of numbers. Not cabin, Kincaid said. He fought every reflex in a pilot's library and kept the ballast where it was. His right hand twitched, and he slapped it again, harder this time. Stop it. Stop. The brine decided it was a pupil, and we were the light. The dome rose, pulled by nothing we could name, and the hydrophone tip sat at the center like a moat. The surface around the dome flattened, and the flatness had intent. I felt it the way you can feel someone staring at the back of your neck. Don't touch the arms, Nurse said, and the arms moved anyway. The manipulator nearest the lattice cocked its wrist a degree and drifted down. Miguel, his chin streaked red, slammed the dead man and the servos stiffened, too late to erase the little bump that closed the pincer around 2 hairs of glass. The filaments snapped with a noise that was not a noise, but a pressure flick against the gums. The broken end slid into the waiting mouth of the sample vial clipped at the claw. The vial's spring lid kissed shut. Did you just take a... I started. No, Miguel said automatically, voice offended by the idea that he could have, would have. His hands were on the safe. His foot was braced like a man arresting a door with his body. He looked sick with the wrongness of it. I didn't. The lights strobed faster. The cone of white from one LED went to surgical blue, then to a bone white that made everything look like morgue photographs. The brine dome collapsed without breaking, a gesture of indifference, and the bloop that had been call and response became a single long line, the held breath from the end of childhood before a cry. The sub lurched. 1 second we were a bead of mercury. The next we were a thimble dragged across salt. A chimney slid in from the edge of the lamp, and we kissed it with the shoulder. The kiss was metal on mineral, and the panel just above my knee buckled with an angry aluminum sigh. A new noise entered the sphere. It was a hiss, soft and confident. Seal, Miguel said, already moving. He pressed a hand to the seam and came away with damp on his fingertips that smelled like coins kept in a wet pocket. His pupils were huge. It's not seawater. It's gas. Hydrogen sulfide, Nurse said softly, as if saying it loudly would invite more. Her face went pale yellow in the wrong light. Trace, we breathed worse in the lab. We breathe it slow. She was lying to me kindly. You cannot tell the body to breathe slow when the room tastes like electricity and eggs. The cabinets bent inward by a hair, sheet metal learning and inflection. The instrument's bezels acquired a smile they shouldn't have. The screen on Spectral Twin bowed in the middle like a book that wants to close. The hull learned a new note, a tiny sweet hum that made my jaw ache. The viewport filled with people. A man I knew from a hallway years ago, his name gone, lifted his hand in greeting like we'd just run into each other at the post office. An old teacher, asleep and kind, blinked and became a stranger with teeth too even. They were stacked behind each other in impossible perspective, and the brine turned their edges to knives of light. Don't look, Nurse said, and kept looking. Tears stood in her eyes. Don't look and it stops being so detailed. It's a loop, I said. I said it to ward it off. It's our prefrontal cortex chasing its tail. Hypoxia plus H2S plus the part where the room is talking, Kincaid said, even and very gentle, like a father in a hospital holding a child who will not sleep. Eyes on your instruments. My instrument was Spectral Twin, and Spectral Twin had decided to be delighted. It was pulling language out of a scream, and it was very good at that. The screen scrolled with strokes that wrote over themselves, and then slid aside to make room for their own recursions. It wasn't a sentence anymore. It was a chorus, and we were in it, and it had our names. Dump the vial, I said. The words were a shock to me. They were the right words, and I did not know I had them. Get rid of the sample. Miguel didn't move. It wasn't disobedience. He could not. His hands seemed to belong to someone else. His head cocked, as if listening to something in the ballast tank. Blood dripped onto his knuckles in small, proud beads. It wants a thing. He sounded ecstatic and horrified. It wants to be carried. Drop it, Kincaid said, and his voice had gravel in it. Now. Miguel closed the manipulator. The claw opened. The vial should have fallen. It didn't. It hung for a second like a question mark and then went up, a centimeter, toward the bright ceiling that didn't exist. It bobbed there, defiant, and then clinked gently back into the docking clip, like someone had placed it there. Okay, Miguel said to the air. Okay. Nurse swayed. Her pen slipped from her fingers and clattered in a way that felt like a gunshot. She gripped the back of my chair and breathed through her mouth. "I smell pennies," she said, and coughed into her elbow. The hiss by my knee got louder, then quiet again, as if the leak had discovered it was being paid attention to and decided to be coy. The cabin's pressure didn't budge by the numbers. My sinuses told a different story. Each inhale was a fraction of millimeter harder than the last, a subtle opposition. The room and I were negotiating. The brine outside bulged a last time around nothing at all. The faces at the glass tilted in unison and smiled wider, as if we'd made a joke they had always liked. The chimneys leaned back, polite as trees. "Hold your breath," I said, which is the stupidest thing you can say in a sub. Miguel laughed, a wet broken sound. "That's what my boy used to say before he jumped off the diving board," Kincaid said, and then he blinked as if surprised the words had walked out of him. He took his hands off the sticks and slapped his wrists again, once, twice, disciplining the part of him that wanted to dump ballast and rise and tear something by rising. "We don't move until we know which way is out." I saw the future in a cheap prophet's flicker. Us tearing up through the interface, the brine clinging, the pressure difference pinning us to the lip, while the lake poured itself into the sphere through a seam meant to keep air where air belonged. Death lived 6 choices away. So did life. I wanted a third thing, and the third thing was the voice under the cord, the one that had borrowed our timbers. It wasn't done. It wasn't even done with hello. Someone swung a wrench. I didn't see the idea form. I only heard the heavy clank against the repeater crate and flinched like the blow had been to my own face. Miguel was the one with the wrench. His nose dripped onto the knuckles that held it. He hit the crate again, a short, savage chop designed to break the hum. The spool answered with a subsonic chuckle that came up through the deck. He raised the wrench a third time, and Kincaid caught his wrist, palm to palm, 2 men deciding on a decade of friendship in a heartbeat. "Easy," Kincaid said. "Easy. We don't make it angry." "Who's we?" Miguel asked, voice ragged. He let the wrench go. It thunked onto the mat and rolled briefly before Nor's foot found it. I was shaking and didn't know it until the movement made the hydrophone cable shiver in Nor's hands, and the brine's surface printed my tremor as a readable script. The strokes on the screen mimicked the tremor and handed it back. Feedback again, but not the ugly kind. The intimate kind. The kind you have in a conversation when someone repeats your word and waits. It does not want us ignorant, I thought, and the thought was a door I could choose to open or not. It wants a carrier. The vial clicked in its clip like the tongue of an animal testing a gate. "Listen," I said, and I didn't know if I was talking to my friends or the room or myself. "This ends with us taking something we don't mean to take, or with it taking something we mean to keep." "Like what?" Miguel said, smiling without humor. "Our beautiful manners. Our breath," Nurse said. Kincaid looked at the ceiling of the sphere, at a spot none of us had ever looked at on purpose, and nodded to whatever he saw there. He took his hands off his own hands and set them back on the sticks with the care of a man putting a sleeping child into a car seat. The hiss became a whisper. "We are leaving," he said. "If you can help, help. If you won't, move." The sub shuddered, a dog deciding whether to obey. The marine snow beyond the glass unfroze around us by degrees, its choreography unraveling back into decent chaos. The brine's flat glare resumed its impersonation of stillness. The faces in the viewport drifted backward into each other like smoke and became light, and then became nothing. Spectral Twin wrote one last stroke that rose and didn't fall. It held its breath. It waited. We did not say goodbye. We did not say a prayer. The hull hummed the little note it had learned and tucked it into its own metal to keep. The vial sat where it wanted to sit. My mouth tasted like coins, and my skin felt like a drum head tuned a touch too high. The mutiny wasn't over. It had only agreed to let us believe it was. The long night. The bargain for breath we pulled away like thieves who know the house heard them. The lamp beams narrowed to slivers. Kincaid dimmed everything he could dim without turning us blind. The only bright left was the pale bruise of Spectral Twin, and I wanted to throw a jacket over it. "How long on reserves?" Kincaid asked. Miguel checked the panel without touching his nose, which had stopped bleeding and crusted into a small, ugly certainty. "Batteries at 60. If we baby it. CO2 creeping. We've got good scrubbers, but they hate gas that isn't ours." The sphere had a taste now, sweet chemical over coins and a thin, metallic dust that lived behind the tongue. Nor pulled the hydrophone the last inches, hand over hand, like lifting a child out of cold water. The brine let it go as if bored. Passive only, I said. We're not feeding it again. We were careful, Nurse said. That's the part that's going to wake me up for the rest of my life. The lake blurred into a darker dark behind us. The chimneys retreated, organ pipes fading to ribs, and then to the idea of ribs. The hull kept its little hum like a secret it couldn't bear to stop telling. Trim good, Kincaid murmured. We'll take the long way out. Slow and ugly. We rose a meter. 2. 5. The marine snow returned to its chaotic self, which should have been a relief and wasn't. The quiet was behind us, but the cord had learned our names and did not forget fast. Pressure moved inside the cabin in the smallest ways, a light finger on the eustachian tubes, a soft thumb behind the bridge of the nose. It came in pairs. Press, press, release. A measure. Press, release, release. Another. My breath became a metronome in a room that wanted a conductor. I held, exhaled, and the note leaned toward me like a plant toward a window. Feels like the room is counting, Miguel said through his teeth. It wasn't a complaint. It was an inventory of miracles you can't afford. It's talking, Nurse said. That's what this is. It's talking. I don't want it to talk, Kincaid said. He meant it without heat. I wanted to let us go. The lights went another shade lower. The instruments dulled, as if they had grown shy. On spectral twin, the strokes that had been sentences softened into waves. The columns learned how to be patient. The right-hand side, the world's part of our duet, made a shape I had to pull into my mouth to know. Coastal shelves collapsing like wet cake. White lines of beaches unspooling into bruised water. Cables draped across the seafloor humming like a harp no one asked to be built. Stop, I said, because showing was a kind of cruelty. We know. The air got thicker. The scrubber made its soft, innocent purr, turning our breath into chemistry that didn't care about us. The gauge for CO2 ticked in little indecent jumps. The number was still fine by anyone's manual, but the human parts of us disagreed. Emergency oxygen, Nurse said. We feather it, Kincaid replied. Short bursts. We don't spike anything. We took sips. The oxygen was cold and smelled like hospitals and new paint. It gave me a headache in the way coffee can, and I took the headache like a gift. The sphere popped once, twice. The note under all other notes learned our rhythm, and the rhythm pressed a question to our mouths. How badly do you want to stay one thing? I saw what it offered. It wasn't pictures, not exactly. It was pressure grammar, images bumped into the softest parts of my skull by changes in the way the room held itself. A whale the size of a chapel passing under our hull with barnacles like rosary beads. A line of horses on a beach that had never known horses, salt wind turning their manes into white script. A cable relay, sunlit in an amphitheater of cranes, the cake displayed on a plate before someone cut it. The through line wasn't beauty. It was scale. The vial in the manipulator clip clicked lightly against itself, as if impatient. We can cut the arm, let the sample go with it, Miguel said, surprising himself. He loved that arm more than anyone. Dead loss, but we leave it here, not there. Not with us, Nurse said, with a kind of hungry relief. Yes. Hold, Kincaid said, and the word was a prayer stitched to a command. We don't trade limbs while we're inside a mouth. I can't explain the certainty that reached me then. It has no proof any more than a dream has proof. But the room had been counting, and I had been counting back. 3, 5, 7. It felt like the shape of a bargain. I leaned close to the mic and my own breath fogged the glass, so I could talk to myself in a mirror that had the wrong depth. I said it aloud because words are anchors even when they're spoken too gently to pass through water. Take me, I told the room. Take me and let them go. I'll carry you. Just let them go. Nor stopped writing. Kincaid didn't look at me. Miguel's head came up, eyes black coffee wide. The sub breathed in that tiny, private way, and all the hairs on my arms lifted as if a storm crossed 2 rooms away. There was a soft, intimate pressure inside my ears that wasn't a pop or a pain. It was closer to a kiss given in the dark by someone who doesn't want you to turn on the light. The cord lowered. Not a lot. Just enough to tell the smaller animals in my body to stop bolting. Ballast response, Kincaid said, bewildered and reverent. She wants to go up. Slow, I said. She'll change her mind if we rush. We rose in steps like a child testing stairs with a bad leg. The marine snow lost its choreography and learned how to mind its own business again. The hull kept a little of the hum, but it wasn't trying to be the whole song anymore. Every meter up made a new headache bloom and die behind my eyes. The radio crackled like a candy wrapper. For a moment it spoke in the wrong voice. The warm burr of a technician who wasn't on our boat, who never had been, telling us we were doing great. Just a little more, that's it. Then the ocean remembered its manners and gave us our own people. Nereid to Lachesis, say status. Kincaid swallowed hard. Alive, he said. We're alive. Copy alive. ROV is in the water. Hold depth at 2-9 if you can. We're bringing you a leash. Hold 2-9, Kincaid replied, and stroked the sticks like a dog you love but don't know anymore. The voice under the voice in the speaker was still there. It had not finished the conversation. It had only agreed to keep it in the room. It pressed another pair of syllables into my sinuses and showed me a graph of my whole life on a single axis. Noise at the edges, a quiet core, then more noise. It put its finger on the quiet and waited to see if I'd push back. I hear you, I said, barely, so the others could pretend it was a breath. The ROV found us like a good dog in bad weather, a bloom of work lights in our periphery, and then a flitting shape with a grappling grin. Its camera blinked a hello. It was either a joke or a coincidence. I wanted it to be a joke. The tether's long belly writhed above us, uncomplicated and human, and when the hook locked into our bridle, the sub gave the most honest sound I'd ever heard from her, a tiny gasp of relief. Let yourself be helped, Ner whispered, hand on the console as if petting an animal that had finally let the vet touch it. The Nereid took weight. We could feel it like a change in weather. The hull relaxed a fraction. The chords softened another half note and slid under the floor of hearing, where it would stay, waiting. We rose through bands of water that had opinions about who belonged. The taste of sulfur thinned. The smell of hot plastic wandered off. Breath became something less than work. Miguel wiped his face and, because he was who he was, apologized to no one for bleeding on the equipment. Surface in 20, the radio said. Gurney's on deck. Don't be heroes. Copy. Copy, don't be heroes, Kincaid said, and closed his eyes for 1 second, like a man tasting the word hope again after a long winter. The hatch opened to air colder than any water and brighter than any lamp. Hands reached in with more authority than gentleness. Oxygen masks found mouths. Someone said my name, and I didn't recognize it at first. The sky was a gray tin lid. Seabirds swore like old sailors. They took the vial from the manipulator, and I saw the tech flinch when he realized it was cold enough to smoke in the warm air. He held it like a grenade and passed it hand to hand until it vanished into a cooler with a sticker that said property of NO1 important. There is so much you can learn from a sticker. They zipped us into Deccan with the buzzing lights and the bleach and the kindly lies. Nor sat on her bench and looked at her hands like they belonged to an animal she had fed and now couldn't set loose. She didn't quite meet my eyes. You did something, she said. Not accusing, not grateful. The words had nowhere to go in her mouth that didn't feel like treason. I asked for air, I said. It was quieter. It would not stop. I breathed with it until it learned my rhythm again, then stopped before it learned too much. Surface, debrief, denial, and the long after they built a room out of clipboards and coffee breath and called it debrief. The Helios man wore a new shirt not made for salt. The NOAA scientist had the same tired line of eyeliner and a pen that had already run dry. Every time I told the story, it grew smaller between my teeth. Clarify feedback surge, Helios said. He made the word smooth. Source internal or environmental? Environmental, I said. We killed Gain, and it didn't care. So an earthquake, he said, cheerful as a dentist. Transient pressure. Happens. Not here, not like that, Nurse said. She sounded like someone being polite at a funeral. You don't get anechoic domes at seep rims. You don't get orchestration. The NOAA scientist raised 2 fingers to her temple, a tiny salute to a headache she couldn't treat. We have raw logs. We'll see. Kincaid signed forms like someone paying ransoms in a country that didn't accept his currency. Miguel read his NDA aloud in a stage whisper that made himself laugh and no one else. The words proprietary and preliminary did a pretty dance around the idea that none of us owned what had happened. The vial went to a lab under the kind of lights that don't flicker. I watched it leave the ship in a hard case with an escort, and then, 2 weeks later, I watched a man with a calm voice tell me it was misrouted. The tracking numbers grew errors like barnacles. In one version of my life, someone in a suit lost it. In another, someone in a suit opened it, and it was empty, and they decided not to tell us. In the version that wakes me at 3, it walked. The official write-up read like a weather report in a year without storms. An earthquake disturbed an anoxic brine pool, temporarily affecting acoustic returns. The newly installed repeater functions nominally. The anomalous audio was attributed to cross-channel contamination and sensor saturation. Crew experienced transient hypoxia and stress responses. NOAA thanks Helios for their support. Helios thanks NOAA for their partnership. Everyone thanks the ocean for remaining where it belongs. We went home. Kincaid sent exactly one email that said not dead yet and a photo of a barbecue where his son did not exist. Miguel texted me 3 times from a pier with a plastic cup of beer in the frame. On the last one, the beer was empty and the cup was crushed, and you could see the skin under his nose healing pink. Nor sent me a link to a paper about Miocene whales with 3 question marks, and then nothing for months. I opened my apartment door, and the note stepped in ahead of me like a relative who'd kept a key. The radiator sang its long vowels. The window frame ticked. The ceiling breathed closer to my mouth at 3 in the morning, and I woke with my tongue metal sour and a misremembered hand in mine. Ordinary things became instruments. The stairwell had a favorite semitone and chose it when it rained. The elevator hummed in the key of apology. Nothing so dramatic as a face in the glass anymore. The faces learned I wouldn't give them my eyes. Instead, I got small, polite gestures. The tea in my cup told me when I was lying. The floor leaned toward my lungs when I held my breath too long at the sink. When it got bad, I learned to hum a counter note. Not loud. A thread of sound under my breath. The lowest tone I could shape with my chest. The room steadied. A picture frame stopped thinking about falling. The radiator climbed down half a step. It was like laying a coin on a railroad track and finding the train had decided to take a scenic route. I tried to listen to other people talk about weather and rent. I nodded at jokes about the sea, at pirate flags on toddlers' shirts. The words slid around the quiet like water around a rock. On the worst days, I pressed my palm to the wall and felt the building answer in the place where buildings have hearts. On the better days, I pretended the quiet was just a bandwidth no one bothered to tune. Helios called once with a survey about my crew experience. I told them the coffee was too strong and the stairs too steep and the surgical tape had made my skin itch. They thanked me and asked about Event 773. I said it was geology. This made us both feel better for a couple of seconds. News came from the world like small earthquakes no one admitted to feeling. A cluster of fish kills in a bay with no toxin. A pod of whales beaching themselves with skin unmarked. Coastal fiber relays that hiccuped at night. Texts reporting a hum in the racks they couldn't log. Rumors scrolled by on message boards that smelled like fear and old coffee. Nor stopped answering email and then called at 3:19 in the morning on a Wednesday with rain on her line and said, very soft, "It's everywhere, if you tune for it." She didn't mean the ocean. She meant the instrument made by the cables we laid like nerves across the floor of the world. "What do we do?" I asked. She laughed a little like someone failing at a prayer. "Breathe carefully," she said, and hung up before she could rescind the advice. I learned not to name it. Naming turns you into a missionary or a liar. The note in my walls turned me into a weather vane. On the worst nights, I practiced the bargain I had made without a contract. I was a carrier, which is another word for person. I taught myself not to teach. I held my breath and counted, and let go and counted, and put my forehead against the cool paint, and waited for morning to choose me. On the days when the limbic animal in me wanted to run, I walked down to the river and watched the water pretend to be harmless. Bridges have a music of their own. I leaned my elbows on rusted rail and hummed a little counter note, and the water hummed back a hair lower, indulgent as a parent who lets a child win at cards. People asked me once or twice if I missed the sea. I said I never left it. They laughed like I'd made a poet's joke. It wasn't a joke. Some rooms change you. Some rooms come with you. I bought my ticket under a different name and packed like I was running away from a house that had learned my schedule. The mic went into the case with the hydrophone and the battered laptop Helios paid for in '98 and never took back. I told myself I was traveling light. Guilt weighed less than it used to. That's how you know it's yours. The dock smelled like diesel and thawed bait. A gull wheeled once and screamed nothing helpful. The charter was an old research hull with its original name ground off, and a new one painted crooked. The captain didn't ask questions beyond cash and coordinates. His deckhand, a woman with scars on 2 knuckles and the tired optimism of someone who loves bad weather, looked at my gear and said, "Deep or dumb?" "Both," I said, and we all pretended that was fine. We left at night. The city turned its back. The river rolled out into a bigger black with small teeth. Diesel breath and salt and coffee. I set the laptop on a crate and woke Spectral Twin. It booted with the grace of a retired dog. I touched the keys like I was praying to an old god in a new church. The news had grown a tone lately. Fish floating in still water, bellies unmarked. Whales on beaches without reasons. Coastal repeaters that stuttered at 2 in the morning and healed themselves by lunch. The rumor was a hum in the racks. If you stood in certain rooms and held your breath, you could feel the ceiling lean toward you. We crossed the shelf, and the old Payne stepped into the cabin like a relative who'd kept a key. The Dexlow note found my bones. I matched it, then stopped. You don't get that habit unless you've been trained by something that is not human. The captain said, "Storm tomorrow. You're sure on your spot?" "As sure as I can be," I said, and that was the last ordinary thing anyone asked me. I had hired the sub through a friend of a friend who took contracts no one else wanted and called them favors. 2 seats, 1 pilot, 1 passenger, a sphere with a window like an unblinking eye, rated deeper than my fear. The pilot was older than me and younger than my dread and introduced herself as Hannah, though that might have been for my benefit. "Breathing is free until it isn't," she said, strapping me in. "Breathe like it belongs to you." "It does," I said, and didn't believe myself. The descent felt like a rehearsal I should have nailed the first time. Blue, then ink, then the velvet that drinks lamps and gives back the memory of stars. Marine snow thickened into a hymn I had learned and tried to forget. At 3,000 meters, the sphere took on a voice I knew too well. Tiny ticks as stresses walked to different chairs, a long sigh of metal remembering its manners. Hannah kept her hands on the sticks like a priest kneeling. "You've been here," she said, not a question. "Once," I said. "It stayed." "Things do," she said. The coordinates stuttered on the screen, polite as a cough. The drift vector rotated as if a hand were choosing where to place us. We slid past the edge of the Siren Quiet, and the world put a finger to its lips. Even the ship screws from other hemispheres stepped backwards in my head. We found the lake. The cathedral had grown. The chimneys were taller and closer. Organ pipes thickened into columns. The filaments that had been fringes were panes now, latticed, arches on arches. The surface of the brine lay blank and wrong, a mirror that preferred the world on its own side. Hannah's breath fogged the edge of the viewport in a crescent that made my skin remember fear. "Pretty," she said, and left it at that. I opened the latch on the empty sample canister I had carried like a relic. It wasn't the vial from the ship. No one ever let me touch that one again, and then it wasn't anywhere. This was identical and pointless. I had brought it to prove something to myself that I already knew and didn't want to say out loud. "It's not in there," Hannah said, side-eyeing the case as if it might hatch. "Whatever you think you took, you didn't." "I know," I said. "It's in bone." She didn't ask which bone. We both knew. The petrous part of the temporal, the rock inside the ear that most people never think about until planes and colds and pressure teach them it exists. The only rock the body grows on purpose. I had been a carrier for years. We all carry something. Mine had a tone. Nora used to say the ocean never forgets. I had wanted to correct her and make it sound like science. I don't do that now. We lowered the hydrophone. The cable's braid drew its clean line into the darker dark. The brine accepted. The first sensation was that rearrangement, the polite weight shift of a giant changing feet. Then the cord came on like a weather system waking. Spectral Twin made a better listener than any of us. It laid the strokes side by side, left column and right, not a mirror but a conversation. Call. Response. Offset. Grace note. Choice. I breathed and the line lifted a hair. At first the voices borrowed the crew who weren't here. Kincaid's son's laugh stretched and folded into a tone that sat in the hinge of my jaw. Nor's extinct wail swam up out of time and showed its throat. Miguel's gallows hum made the frame in front of me tremble, an awful, sweet tick you only get when power knows your name. Then it chose me. The lakeside made a quiet circle that traveled its rim and settled under us like a blessing. In the right-hand column of the screen, Strokes wrote sentences I'd already said. They weren't just similar. They were mine. You could see the breath in them. "This is my last log," it wrote, in pressure and delay. "Turn this off if it starts to sink. Don't teach your house to speak." The sphere remembered to pop and release. Hannah stiffened. "Ventriloquists," she said. "I hate ventriloquists." "It's quoting," I said. "It's deciding," she said, and that was worse. The cord spread itself thinner, as if deciding on altitude. The return grew cleaner when I straightened and dirtier when I hunched. Press, press, release. Press, release, release. My breath worked that rhythm without asking me. It showed me cables from orbit, thin white scars across the floor of the world. Repeaters as bright knots. All those glass throats. All those frets. We tuned the ocean and gave it strings. "You came here to do what?" Hannah asked. Her voice turned deliberately dull, as if dullness could make choices polite. "Untune it," I said, and tasted the lie. "Or no, not that. I can't. Slow it. Ground it. Be heavy where it wants to lift." "That a plan?" she asked. "Or liturgy?" "Both," I said, and took my hands off the case as if it could burn me. I had practiced in rooms made of drywall and bad plumbing. Taught myself to hum a counter note when the walls leaned toward my lungs. This was not drywall. This was a cathedral, and it liked my breath. "I will stay," I said, and didn't recognize my own voice. "Take me and let the rest go." "I will hold it." "I can hold." Hannah's head went very still. "Say that again." "Take me," I said to the brine, to the cord, to whatever in the room had been writing my sentences before I had. "I am here. I will be the stone. Just leave it where we left it. Leave the houses. Leave the children. Leave the bridges alone." Hannah's hands whitened on the sticks. "We don't leave people. You left people 1,000 times," I said softly. "We all have. This time you take one back." "You think that's a bargain it understands?" "It understands pressure," I said. "It understands adding and subtracting mass until the note changes. What if it wants amplitude, not damping? Then it already has me, and you're wasting the rest." There are sounds you never forget. The hiss when water goes in a lung. The little grunt when a newborn refuses to cry yet. The groan a building makes when wind sits on it for a whole day. The sphere made none of those. It made a breath that was almost not a sound at all. The pressure inside my ears softened until it was almost unkind in its kindness. Hannah licked her lips like a child tasting snow. "I hate this," she said, and didn't move. "I hate this in you." "I know," I said. She said, "Tell me when." And that was our contract. I took the empty vial and cracked it open like a joke I had refused to understand. I held it to my ear like a shell. There was nothing in it except the small, embarrassed whistle of breath. I put it down. The hydrophone hung at the edge of the interface. The lake lifted by less than a breath and kissed it. The columns of strokes on the screen narrowed, then merged, then parted again. The hull learned the note it had practiced for decades and sang it back. I unbuckled. Hannah's hand shot out and caught my wrist, pilot fast. "Don't. I'm not opening the hatch," I said. "I'm not a hero. I'm a rock." She squeezed, then let go. "I will come back," she said, an oath that made lousy sense. "You won't have to," I said, and smiled like a poor liar. I slid down until my back was against the cold base of the sphere and my mouth was close to the mic, though I wasn't sure what audience I had left. The lake and I inhaled together. We exhaled together. 3, 5, 7. Numbers like knots. I hummed the counter note I'd taught myself in rooms that creaked like hulls. The brine found it and made room for it. A seat at the table. It cost me something I had expected to keep and felt like setting a heavy bowl on a table and watching it not tip. Hannah's voice was careful. "You want me to witness. I want you to go up sane," I said. "I want you to tell them I forgot how to be funny before you had to decide if you liked me." She laughed without permission. "Your breath is changing their language," she said, not to flatter me. "Look at the spacing." I looked. The strokes made pauses where pauses would matter to a human ear. The commas arrived like rain on hot stone. The right-hand column waited after each sentence in a way that was no longer a trick. I answered in the only grammar I had. "Up," I said to Hannah, without moving anything important in my face. "Now." She set the sticks like laying a child down where they might sleep. The ballast obeyed. The lake let us. The cord shifted its weight, and decided to stay inside my bones. It quoted me one last time, and the walls of the sphere took the words and made them furniture. If it starts to sink, turn this off. If anything in this feels like it is listening back, leave it alone. It waited. I have never been good at being left. I closed my eyes, which helped nothing. I could feel the cable droop, then lift, then droop again as the water took its tax. The smell of plastic and scrubber and cold metal and coins diluted themselves and settled into the corners of the room like good house guests. The radio crackled far away. The captain said something about weather, and Hannah lied to him, because pilots are allowed. We rose. The cathedral receded like a country you loved enough to leave. I pressed my mouth to the mic because distance is a kind of lie, and I wanted this part to be true. If you've heard the low note under this, I am sorry. If your breath tries to conduct instead of fill, I am more sorry than I know how to be. Please don't hum along. You teach a room by accident, and some rooms never forget what you teach them. I will stay here and hold as long as I can. You go. Breathe like it belongs to you.